As much as I love this plugin, it's still not super great for sampling, I don't think. And Reason Studios needs to teach their players how music theory works. Last week I made a video going over the basics of Pattern Mutator. This is the new player by Reason Studios, and it's got a lot of awesome features. Make sure you check that out if you haven't already. This week we're going to be going over some more unusual ways of using this player, and something that I wish Reason Studios had implemented a little bit better. We'll go over that and hopefully try and avoid some confusion for you in the future. Before we get into it, make sure you give the video a like, subscribe if you haven't, but let's get into some of the more unusual ways we can use Pattern Mutator. Pattern Mutator is essentially sending MIDI information, and Dr. Octarex is triggered by MIDI information. So what we can use Pattern Mutator for is to come up with interesting parts using Dr. Octarex. So if I turn Pattern Mutator off and run the Dr. Octarex, this is what we get. I've messed around a little bit with the panning on a bunch of these slices and altering them and whatnot to create a little more variation. This is an awesome thing we can do here. Pattern Mutator gives us a whole lot of variation already. Then if we do things like set the alt slices on Dr. Octarex, it's gonna, I don't know exactly how much, but double the amount of variation we can get out of this combination, which is pretty awesome. What I've got going on here, if we turn Pattern Mutator on, is these patterns that I've generated that are basically just triggering slices on the MIDI keyboard. Now, there are a few things that we need to be aware of with this. If we're not, it's gonna make a mess. First of all, if we reset this device and just drag in something and hit run, you'll notice nothing's happening. That's because it's starting playing from C2. Dr. Octarex starts playing from C1. So what we need to do is drag this transpose thing down to C1. Now, if I hit play, it's going to be playing the slices on the Dr. Octarex. Another really important thing to be aware of is the keyboard commands that control the bank switching on Dr. Octarex. These are the ones that are happening below C1. And depending on whether or not Pattern Mutator sees fit to jump down an octave, will determine whether or not it hits the key that changes the bank that you're in. So if I play Pattern Mutator at the moment, watch what happens here on the Dr. Octarex. I'm in this bank 1 at the moment, but you'll see it switch. If I turn this octave mutate amount up and hit mutate, it adjusted the global transpose. Okay, all right, okay. How did it even do that? I don't know what key command controls that. Let's put that back down to 0. See, it happened right there, So this is one thing to be aware of when we're using Pattern Mutator with an instrument like Dr. Octarex. There are modifier keys on Dr. Octarex in terms of the mapping across the MIDI keyboard, and if we hit one of those through the Pattern Mutator's loop, it's gonna mess up what's happening. So it's a little bit of a roll of dice, I think. We can get some really cool results out of slicing stuff up using the Pattern Mutator, but because of the random modifier keys, we can also get some problematic material, which I don't love. I think it'd be cool if there was a way to select the range of notes that Pattern Mutator worked on. I don't know if I'm doing something really, really wrong here, or if Pattern Mutator is triggering a modifier key that is making my global transpose change. You can see it's happening on this slice here. That's weird. Let's go back to our original pattern. See, that one's good. That one's not triggering any weird modifier keys. Everything's happening within the riff. Let me know in the comments if you've got any ideas about this. I really like the idea of Pattern Mutator working with Dr. Octarex. However, I feel like there are too many variables that I can't control, and I don't know what it's triggering half the time in Dr. Octarex. Okay, let's move on and have a look at the second scenario here. In this example, I've got the Pattern Mutator set to the MIDI out, and then that one is going to control the slices on my sampler here. This is very much the same execution as doing it with Dr. Octarex. It's the same kind of vibe. We end up with this. So again, I just have a Pattern Mutator triggering whatever it's triggering, and it's playing these slices on my sampler. Now, I kind of prefer this to Octarex because it gives me far more control and it's a heck of a lot easier to see what's happening. There's also not all these weird modifier keys that Pattern Mutator is accidentally triggering. I still can't really... What if we slice to drum rack? What does that do? So if we slice to the drum rack, we can see what notes Pattern Mutator is hitting if we look down here. So we can see it's hitting a bunch of notes that I'm not even playing. Or I don't have slice, I don't have anything, I don't have any material there. I think Pattern Mutator would be really, really great for this type of application if we had a little more control over the range of notes that it generated the pattern in. I love this octave pitch idea, but it just doesn't quite go far enough. It's like, cool, I can generate notes, but now, in this example, it's generating notes that I don't want. When I try and use it with Dr. Octarex, which is one of Reason's instruments, as far as I'm aware, I can't figure out a way to have it not accidentally trigger notes that are going to modify the Dr. Octarex. I don't know if Reason Studios could do this in an update. If there was a way to set the boundaries that the octave and pitch knob play in, or that the swap knob plays in, that would be really, really awesome. Because I absolutely love the concept of Pattern Mutator. I think it's amazing. But things like that just end up making it harder to make music with Pattern Mutator from a sampling kind of perspective and stuff. Yeah, so, that's interesting. Let's look at the third scenario we've got here. So in this example, I'm using a Pattern Mutator to, again, just send something out to the Reason rack here on the second channel, just a bass synth. We've got this Pattern Mutator. What I'm going to do is step sequence in this riff in the key of C minor. I'm going to play C, D, E flat, G, 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 B flat. All notes in the key of C minor. Let's see what we got. All right, so if we record that now. And we look at what we've got. C, D, E flat, G, 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 B flat. Ableton's dumb and doesn't understand music theory, so it's spitting us this out in sharps, but we're in the key of C minor here. Excellent. That means if I turn on the scales and chords and select C minor, it should sound exactly the same if I run the pattern. Nothing changes. In fact, let's record that while we're doing it. Nothing has changed. You can see we've got our C minor riff here, and that C minor riff just continues the whole way through. So, all right, okay, so that's a thing. let's delete this again. This time we'll set our scales and chords to C major, and we will play this riff in C minor on Pattern Mutator. Record it and see what happens. We'll turn this on, it's going to hit C major. Did you catch what happened there? If we examine the MIDI data, we start off in C minor, C, D, E flat, G, 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 B flat. This is when I kicked in the scales and chords generator. Right here. C, D, G, 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 A. That's not the right note. And you'll notice over here I've gone C, D, E flat. When I kick in the scales and chords generator, it goes C, D, D. So this is a little misleading and can be confusing because when we're dealing with the scales and chords generator, this experiment shows us that it's not actually transposing what we're playing into a different key. It says here that we're in the key of C major, and before I was in the key of C minor, it tells me what the key is here, and then I switch to the key of C major, and it tells me those are those notes there. Great, that's true. But when I play my pattern through it, it's not actually spitting the pattern out in a different key, because if it was, it would recognize that this D sharp here is the third scale degree in C minor, and when I switched it to C major, it would spit out the third scale degree in C major, which should be an E. And same with the B flat being the seventh scale degree. The seventh scale degree here should be a B. So my riff should actually sound like this when I switch to major. But it doesn't. In fact, it still sounds kind of like C minor because it's using notes that are still in C minor. And so how I assume this has been programmed is based purely on intervals. It's saying these are the notes in C major, these are the notes in C minor, and it's chosen to round down by semitone intervals to the nearest note. So when C minor is here using this E flat, when I switch to C major, instead of taking it up to the E, what it's doing is it's rounding it down to the D, which is kind of a little misleading because that really brings into question every single one of these, and you still have to actually know music theory to know whether it's changing your riffs correctly, because this riff here, as it stands, doesn't really sound like it's not in C minor. Yeah, it's getting rid of notes that are characteristically C minor, but they're notes that are common between C minor and C major. It's actually changing our riff. This is not what I wanted from a scale perspective. I wouldn't call this a fault so much as maybe just a flaw with the way DAWs handle understanding of keys generally. As I mentioned before, Ableton's kind of dumb and doesn't let you specify when you're in like a minor key or a major key or whatever. Everything is always just D sharp. And if you understand how keys work, that's fine. But for something like the scales and chords generator, where it's telling you that you're in the key of C and it's telling you what scale you're using, I would really hope that it actually transposes your keys properly, especially when you combine it with something like Pattern Mutator, which is essentially generating riffs for you. If you generate a riff and you're like, oh, I like that. Hang on, what will that riff sound like if I put it in C major? So you go down here, you chuck it in C major because it was a minor, and you're like, oh yeah, you've actually changed your riff. It's not the same riff being played in C major. It's an entirely different riff because you're using different scale degrees. I think that's something to be aware of. If you don't really care about music theory at all and it doesn't influence how you write music, then it's probably not an issue. But it's probably a good point to be aware of if you're working with Pattern Mutator in this way and wondering why your riff doesn't quite feel like it did before. Well, that is the video, guys. Today we went over a few things that I think Pattern Mutator possibly needs to improve on, because as much as I love this plugin, it's still not super great for sampling, I don't think. And Reason Studios needs to teach their players how music theory works. If you like this video, don't forget to give it a like, subscribe, and let me know in the comments if you've got any ideas about how to possibly get it working better with Octarex, because that's something I really want to try again in the future. But given its current state, I don't know if I'll be using it with that. Anyway, let me know your thoughts in the comments. I'll catch you guys next time.